Hi there, my name is Andy Farquharson and I'm your host on Alternative Exit, the podcast dedicated to educating small business owners about the possibilities, benefits and challenges of transitioning to an employee ownership model. Did you know that there are over 200 million SMEs around the globe with an owner that will be retiring within the next 10 years? Many of these owners will never actually find a buyer for their business, forcing them to close their doors, wreaking havoc on their employees and the communities. There is an alternative. This show will explore different forms of employee ownership and the best practices for a successful transition. Each episode is going to feature interviews with experts on employee ownership, business owners who've successfully made the transition, and consultants who've helped facilitate these changes. Okay, now let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to the Alternative Exit. Today we've got a great guest joining the show. Now, we've got Frank Cetera. Frank is a long-time advocate for employee ownership. He currently serves as the director of the Business Transfers Program at the Democracy at Work Institute, where he leads the national efforts to support business transitions towards employee ownership, which is a great topic for us today. In addition to his professional work with employee ownership, Frank is deeply involved in many sort of community and cooperative initiatives. I mean, he's founded several nonprofits and currently serves on the board of the Syracuse Cooperative Federal Credit Union, which is a community development financial institution, which is super important in the transition transitions to employee ownership and supporting local community initiatives. Frank, welcome to the Alternative Exit.
Happy to be here, Andy. Thanks for inviting me.
No worries. Did I get everything right on that intro?
Yeah, well, founded one nonprofit, not several.
Okay. Apologies. I got that plural incorrect. But you've had a really broad experience as you've gone through from, like, you've done some work sort of in the consulting space, obviously a lot of work around cooperatives. What has drawn you to employee ownership?
It's been a gradual transition over time, right? I mean, I wasn't raised with knowledge of employee ownership or cooperatives like many people.
Yeah, that's right. Who is?
Yeah. But I do trace everything back to growing up in a working class, blue collar, rural household where my father was a trainman working out of the coal mines, and how he was a union member during that time. So the initial kind of, workers' rights sense of workers' rights came from that knowledge of what my father was involved with. He was the president of our his local union chapter for a while. And then, through that as well, I got my first credit union account, right? Put a couple bucks in now and then for me, they did. And I was able to sort of watch that grow. Didn't really know at that point still, right? Early years, what it meant to be involved in a union or credit union, worker cooperative or anything like that. But I had sort of that, sort of baked in a little bit.
Right, that's super cool. Okay. And then how did that, so that's obviously starting right from the genesis. Like, how did you sort of make this part of your professional career?
Yeah, I think it was, there's a sense of always wanting to get community engagement around, my life, and not to exist in sort of a solo silo in a sense, right? I mean, growing up, again, we had a great community of friends around and small town kind of situation. And then over time, I guess, going to college and living in the dorm and, having a close group of friendships there, graduating from that, getting involved with activities like AmeriCorps, Pennsylvania Service Corps, and the Student Conservation Association, working with sort of, again, small groups that were tightly ensconced together and shared values and cared for each other. And eventually, I got a opportunity to sort of leverage my time in environmental and other social not-for-profit work into the business development world here in Syracuse, New York. I accepted a job with the Small Business Development Center, which is one of our SBA-funded technical assistance providers across the country here in the United States, and was able to then, integrate my knowledge, my skills, my interests in cooperatives and employee ownership and, green business into that role and it sort of blossomed from there.
Okay, that's awesome to hear. Is what I love hearing about. What seemed to have shaped a lot of your prior history was around sort of just community and connection with people, and it's great to see that you've been able to, I guess, find a way to continue that into your professional life. So, I'd love it if you could please sort of introduce the audience to Dowie and the work that they do as an organisation.
Dowie grew out of the United States Federation for Worker Cooperatives. So the Federation for short, which has been around for about 20 years, is sort of the chamber, right? The business association for worker cooperatives here in the United States. And, they provide a number of business related services to those worker cooperatives, including keeping a database, offering insurance, things that a business association would do. At one point, about 11 years ago now, Dowie was created to be sort of to be an effort to grow the field more so than to support the current field, right?
Okay.
So research, data, project development. We refer to ourselves as a think and do tank. So creating tools, creating resources, demonstrating how things can move forward and can be successful. And so we do have a focus on the worker cooperative model, within our organization's DNA. Our goal is to expand the number of worker cooperatives and thus the number of quality jobs that are a result of worker cooperatives. And, we also look most directly at those affected by social and economic inequality, people of color, recent immigrants, low-wage workforces, because their jobs and their livelihoods are most at risk from, not being an owner, not having a quality job situation as well. So that's our big picture. We do work, in the broad-based employee ownership field, in that we recognize, the employee ownership trust model, the employee stock ownership plans, the ESOPs, and understand that one of those models hopefully will be right for a business going through a succession plan. It won't necessarily be the worker cooperative model, but it could be one of the others as well.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that. We'll dig into some of those different models and where you see that they fit a little bit later. But I think one of the first times that I heard about Dowie was was coming across you guys in some of your research. So definitely on the think side. And when it came to the do side, I also heard about you supporting one of the emerging funds in the ESOP transition space in APIS and Heritage, in actually getting there and helping these workers become owners.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was, the APIS and Heritage Fund was incubated within Dowie, and we also currently still have a staff person who is working with APIS and Heritage to facilitate post-transaction success. Right. So enabling those employees who have become owners to continue to understand, the finances, continue to understand what it means to be an owner, how they fit within the, ESOP infrastructure, how they can continue to develop their career and their growth, and, at the same time benefit the company alongside that. So we're happy about the success of that so far. And I believe APIS and Heritage is looking to do a second round of fundraising very soon.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well, which is super exciting for the space. I think that the more inflows of capital means sort of the greater the impact, and the easier it is for people to follow. So it's awesome that they're driving that. So I'd like to take a lens, as you sort of talked about that worker that you've got embedded within A&H, which sort of leads to, I guess, some of the leads to the employee, the core element of the employee-owned model. If we just start, what do you see as the biggest? What do you see and experience as the biggest benefits for employees in all of these employee-owned models? If we just think about more generally.
Well, stability is probably one of the biggest benefits, right? Precarious workforces today, loss of workers' rights, loss of unionization, all these kind of factors that contribute to workers being unsure about, what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next year, and so forth. So the capacity of being an owner in a cooperative, particularly, is that, right, you have democratic ownership and you have democratic decision making and participation. So you have a say in what is happening with that business and the direction that it's going. The other big benefit is an increase in wages, an increase in salary. So we see that, now that the distribution, not only of the governance and the control is more equal, but also the distribution of the finances, the revenue, et cetera, through regular wages, regular salary, but also then the profit sharing at the end of the year based upon patronage for each of the workers. And generally that's, contribution based upon the number of hours worked. But there are other formulas for that as well. So those are two, very clear benefits. I think, a third benefit is the confidence that it can grow in an individual. One thing to just come into work, do your thing 9 to 5 and go home. It's another thing to experience what it means and how what it takes to be a business owner. And once you learn that and get involved in those aspects of the business, I feel like your confidence will grow, just like with any new undertaking that you get into. I think that's an important thing for individuals to consider.
Yeah, I love that one. To me, that's from my own journey, like the confidence that goes from making those mistakes and having that sort of just owning that accountability too. The sort of the buck does stop with you as an owner within that particular part of the business. But that's a scary undertaking for a lot of people. I find. And also,
it's not right for everyone, right? To even in the worker cooperative model, if there's a conversion that's taking place, everybody who is working for that business at that time doesn't necessarily become an owner, right? They don't necessarily become a worker owner. They may just stay on as a regular employee. That might be the right thing for them at that point in time, regardless.
Okay, but it seems that it's that confidence also seems to be the sort of one of the most, I guess, underappreciated elements. It's the one that's it's obviously less tangible, it's harder to measure, but it's not one that you hear as often as, say, like the financial benefits.
I think that, it's pretty obvious that everybody looks at the numbers first in lots of instances when you're considering how you evaluate certain things in life. And but the confidence is really is what's supporting those numbers, right? It's what's supporting the growth of those numbers, the development of those numbers. Worker co-ops have seen, generally across the board, based upon data that we've collected, there is that increase in individual wages and salaries. There is that increase in length of time of employment, with a certain company, which contributes to that stability. And that's all coming back to, being confident in your role as an employee, but then also as an owner. I could go on and on, but everybody has experience of this to some degree, right? I mean, it's kind of that fake it till you make it kind of thing in a sense, right? You got to get involved. You got to get things happening. Here at the collective house that I live at in Syracuse, New York, we have extensive gardens in the back, and when we welcome a new member to live with us, oftentimes they say, "Oh, I don't have any experience with gardening." And I tell them, just go spend an hour every weekend sitting in the garden and observe. And eventually, because you're just doing it and you're mixing yourself into, what's taking place there, you're going to come out ahead.
Sorry, did you say collective house?
Yes.
Talk me through that. What's a collective house?
Yeah. So I bought a house for $1 from the city of Syracuse in 2010. Had been vacant for 4 or 5 years, fixed it up, moved in 2013 with the intent of living collectively with other people outside of the traditional nuclear family model, right? So basically, adults who maybe are not, in a nuclear family, don't have their own, households and so forth. So we joined together. Co-householding is another term that is sometimes used for that. So, we share all the common spaces in the house. We each have private bedrooms. We have shared chores. We cook for each other. We eat together. We take turns shopping. We each contribute to the gardens on a regular basis as well. And we coordinate values-driven activities through the household as well. So things like, we have a fundraising plant sale that we just got finished with. We support the block party here in our neighborhood. We give away, during the pandemic, we had a free pantry outside to give away food and other necessities as well. And what's happening in the next year, 18 months, 2 years, hopefully, though, is that I'm selling the house from my name into a cooperative corporation here in New York State. So
Okay.
we will have, instead of just collectively living together in this model with me having the ownership, we will be providing equity ownership to other individuals who are living here and who are in the community as well.
Wow. Okay. So you're not only sort of helping companies, but you're genuinely living and breathing it each and every minute of the day. That's phenomenal.
Yeah. I feel it in my bones, and everything that I do is kind of geared towards this sense of how can I benefit my neighbors,
Yep. Very cool. Okay. So if we're going back to the employee, I mean, what do you find is the biggest challenge for employees when they start working in an employee-owned environment?
Yeah, the financial statements, understanding the cash flows, the balance sheets, the profit and loss statements. Very few people have experience with that. If you haven't been a business owner before, you'd like to think that people have some practice in that by maintaining a household budget, but that is not necessarily the case in most instances either. And so just learning to read those sheets, right? Learning to understand what they mean, translate them into actionable items for the company and for the organization. So that's a big stumbling block. And, that's how one of the forms of education out there, open book management, right? That is ability to engage your employees in the financials of a business. And that can happen at any time. You don't have to be a, employee-owned business for that to happen. You could be planning your employee-owned transition maybe for, 2 years, 3 years down the line, and you can start open book management practices, at any point and make sure that the employees are ready for that transition. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think another big thing is meeting participation, right? And so this is where confidence comes back into things as well a little bit. So not only does it take really good facilitation, right, to have a valuable meeting experience, but it also takes confidence on the part of the workers who are attendees of a meeting to, be able to speak up, to be able to ask questions, to be able to share alternatives and to strategically think about, the business in the long term as well. So, practice makes perfect in the end. All
right. So that if we think about those two elements, so I'd like to take a deeper dive into the open book management piece, because you talked to those. I totally understand the need for people to be able to read financial statements. And that seems like a fairly straightforward exercise to educate people on what's an income statement, what's a balance sheet, how do they connect. But I find what's so much tougher is helping them translate that into actionable items. How do you go about that process, or how do you go about the process of bringing these financial statements to life for these workers?
Bring them to life, yeah. Well, so there's for me, whenever I work with people learning how to read financial statements, and this is translatable to my time on the board at the credit union as well, is that the statements have to be clear and well defined, right? Yeah. A lot of folks who work in finance or who have been involved in a business's finance, they take a lot of shortcuts and use a lot of acronyms, bundle a bunch of categories under one, subcategories under one big grouping, and it's hard to understand, what exactly is contained in that grouping. So, and they do that most times, I believe, because, they want to have a nice one-page document, if possible, to summarize everything. but it's not really clear to anybody who's reading it if they're not actively involved in the finances. So I think that, abbreviations are probably, best out the door. Having all the subcategories listed out is probably important to do as well. And, spending more than 10 or 15 minutes in a meeting, just having the CEO or the financial officer, whoever it is, run down and say, this is how much we made, this is how much we got in grants, this is how much we spent, and this is what our net is. Really going into the details of, how much did we spend? Oh, it was this amount. What did we spend it on? Right? Translating the numbers into the actual items in the business that somebody might be working with on a daily basis, right? Oh, we got a new machine to do a certain thing on the factory floor. How much did that cost, right? And how long will it take to pay that back over time? And how long would, what kind of revenues are increasing because of it, so to speak. So, just making sure that the numbers reflect actualities in their day to day.
Yep. Yeah, look, I've seen a lot of income statements that mean absolutely nothing. without someone translating them for you, you can definitely see how that happens.
Yeah, and we don't want to have a translator nearby, right? Cut a step out there. Have the worker be able to understand what they're looking at.
Yeah, so much easier. Awesome. And what are some ways that you build confidence for people when they're sort of coming in meetings, like to be able to speak up, to try to improve the business and improve the outcomes for themselves as owners?
Yeah, I think there's different phases for this, right? So there's the sort of initial phase when a business may be in its pre-transition phase before it becomes employee-owned, if we're talking about a conversion from a pre-existing business. And you're talking about hands-on education with the workers. And that involves, oftentimes that involves an outside, a third-party technical assistance provider, consultant, et cetera. At Dowie, and in my role, I'm the backbone coordinator for the Workers to Owners Collaborative, referred to as W2O. And we have about 50 member organizations and individuals across the country. It's a mix of technical assistance providers, financiers, professional service providers, et cetera. And a number of those folks specialize or have experience in providing that educational consulting, right? And so it could be simply, using a worksheet model. It could be hands-on scenarios, right, where they practice some role playing for how to participate in meetings as well. It can be clarifying questions and making sure that they understand the nuances of whatever decision-making model is going to take place. So that's sort of pre-conversion. And then post-conversion, that technical assistance and education generally continues in a lot of cases. We hope that it does in any case. A number of our financiers, particularly our CDFI, non-depository lenders who practice non-extractive lending, one of the requirements in their underwriting is to have a continuing education relationship or a continuing technical assistance relationship with the business and with the workers after the completion of the loan close and the actual conversion of the ownership as well. And so, ongoing education, ongoing practice, et cetera. And again, I mentioned this, but facilitation. If everybody's not trained in how to be confident and how to engage in a meeting, make sure that your facilitator is really, up to par, because their role, right, is not just to take you through an agenda, but it is to draw in and engage the other people in the meeting so that they feel comfortable and are, able to contribute and participate as well.
Now, not all meetings are going to be equal. I mean, not because definitely, like some meetings they're still for management. Some meetings require sort of that broader engagement. Like, how much work is done sort of defining like when you're, say, doing a transition or you're starting out new, how much work is defining what types of meetings? What's the sort of governance of those particular meetings?
Yeah, that's significant. That's significant work that should go into that, right? That's the creation of bylaws and policies that are leading up to that conversion. It's that education to make sure that the workers post conversion, understand those policies and bylaws before getting into the thick of them. That can be done in a variety of ways and at a variety of scales. And so, for a small conversion that's maybe a 5-person or 5-worker employee situation, a small group like that could probably take a template and create a set of bylaws from that template. They might base it upon, maybe they've already been working well as a crew together, so they might base some of those things on how their current activities are. As you get larger and as you scale up, it is helpful to bring on a professional who has experience in the legal aspects of bylaws and decision making, and maybe hire an attorney, maybe hire some other consultant to help with that process. But it's not to be overlooked in any way, right? I mean, it's going to be the core of how those workers function together post conversion. So it has to be really well thought out.
What are some of the common mistakes that people make in the creation of the bylaws and the governance structures within sort of that you've come across?
Mistakes? Well, I think that the one positive, right, is that bylaws can be changed. So if there's a need to do so, I think one common mistake relates to quorums and the number of required attendees and votes for a certain decision making. Another common mistake might be related to, specific policies around the decision making process itself. So a business may, want to operate more organically, but that doesn't necessarily bode well for a decision to be made in the long term, right? So this consensus versus, if you look at the big picture of co-ops and collectives, the idea of consensus versus majority voting and decision making as well. So those bylaws should clearly dictate what type of decision requires what type of decision making and to what extent, right? As you mentioned, everybody is not involved in every process, except for perhaps, the biggest decision making, like the dissolution of a company or the sale of a company to another owner. And so individuals who may be involved in those decision making processes may not be involved in others. If you've got a large enough organization, then you're going to have a representative board or workers council or whatever you call it, who are going to practice, that democratic representation of the workers' needs and the business's needs on a monthly basis. But other workers might not necessarily be involved in that. You can have committee structures that are set up that do engage a larger number of workers over time as well. And just, clarify too, right, that the democratic decision making is intended to be on a horizontal basis, whereas you still got more than likely a vertical management hierarchy within the business, right? You've still got somebody who's got to be a general manager, oversee things. You've got somebody in sales, et cetera. And then you've got floor workers or, general employees as well. And so again, defining those roles, defining those responsibilities, and defining the decision-making for each of those levels.
Okay. So that sounds, sounds substantial. What the existing owners of a business, as they're looking at a transition, how do they respond when you talk about sort of adding all these, like adding these elements of open book management, doing this education and figuring out these participatory frameworks and governance that you talked about there? How do they think about all this work that's required?
Yeah, well, most of the successful conversions we see are from values-driven owners, right? Yeah. So they are undertaking this process of converting to employee ownership because it's in their personal value system. It's not for, other reasons that are necessarily like profit related, right? If you were to sell a company to, if you're trying to sell on the open market, your goal is essentially, trying to get as much as you can out of the assets of that business. But in our case, what we see most of the time is that it's a values-driven operation. And so they are really eager to undertake these kinds of activities and processes, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and so stumbling blocks that you sometimes encounter are that they first got to convince the other important staff of their organization about this. One example is a lumber company here in upstate New York, a lumber and hardware company. And the owner, who is a fourth generation, family ownership business CEO, had this idea of converting to employee ownership as a worker cooperative. And he floated the idea past his accountant, and his accountant told him, yeah, that's not going to work for you, right? And so then it took a couple years until he was able to re-engage with, local and regional economic development agencies and technical assistance providers who understood the model. So he got re-exposed, and then he understood that, now it is a possibility, right? And so he was able to move things forward at that time. And he had wanted to all along, but he wasn't in the right place, and he didn't have the right people in his organization who were, on board or understanding of how that would work for them.
Okay, so that wasn't just sort of ignorance on behalf of like the accountant and service provider. Like he genuinely wasn't ready to make the transition.
Well, there was some ignorance because the accountant was, I believe in this case, the accountant was assuming that this would be a conversion into an ESOP, which was not. So in his experience and in his knowledge, he recognized that this would not be a good business for a conversion to an ESOP. But he didn't have the knowledge to understand that, there's another option in converting to a worker cooperative that could work.
Yeah, that's that awareness of that sort of incredibly influential channel, like of service providers, is crazy. I mean, there's a distinct lack of awareness of the different options out there for ownership structures. How do you see that playing in with this sort of huge transition that we've got with the silver tsunami, where there's just a huge amount of companies looking for that transition?
Yeah, well, one of the strategies that we are really doubling down on now is sort of a local, regional, or city-based, ecosystem development, and that's got that. What we see when we see that be successful, it's when the city has really decided to make an impression on the constituents by being the entity that is standing up for employee ownership, right? I mean, people pay attention when the city administration, the mayor, the business office, business service offices, et cetera, speak forth. And we've had that experience in New York City with our owners to owners hotline, and being the backbone organization of the Worker Cooperative Business Development Initiative, which was maybe the first, large-scale initiative in the United States that was funded directly from the city, millions of dollars to provide funds to technical assistance providers, in also to create a pipeline and an intake process and marketing and advertising campaign to get workers or to get business owners' attention. And so, that's been successful. We've done that in some other cities as well. And we are really trying to encourage, we are trying to work with additional cities as we go forward, because awareness is a big situation. And so we want to try to get, within the scale of places, a city scaled campaign can reach a whole lot of those businesses.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I love the amount of energy going into this time of sort of huge transition in the US is fantastic, and it's definitely and how it's getting support from city, state, federal. It's phenomenal. Something for other jurisdictions and countries to look out.
Well, yeah, and I also want to mention So I mentioned earlier that I worked for the SBDC as a business advisor, and SBDC often thinks of itself as the front line for business services and business advising in the United States, right? Whenever there are, for instance, emergency disaster declarations by the federal government, right? Oftentimes SBDC advisors are actually flown in to an area where there has been devastation and are setting up camp alongside, the American Red Cross and other places, so that there is capacity for business owners to engage them and understand how they can take advantage of disaster relief funding. So same thing with employee ownership. We are working right now with America's SBDC, which is the umbrella organization for all the different SBDC offices across the country. And we have a special interest section there on employee ownership and business transition. And we're training SBDC advisors across the country so that when somebody comes into one of their offices, they at least have the knowledge to say, have you considered employee ownership as a possibility for your business conversion, succession plan, growth and development, et cetera. And then they have the knowledge of where to send them in the resource pathway and referral pathway.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I'm a little bit jealous of all the network and knowledge that you guys have within the network over there. We're very, and look, you've got many more companies and many more structures than sort of other geographies. Sort of where I am at the moment, there isn't anything. Employee ownership's not even on the agenda when it is such an amazing tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll get it there. You're on the front line for that one.
Absolutely. So, before we go, what I'd like to be able to do is ask you a quick round of questions. I'm just going to mention these 3 questions and you offer a quick response. How does that sound?
All right, let's go for it.
All right. Who is the leader that you most admire in employee ownership?
I really have a fondness for W.B. Du Bois, who was heavily involved in cooperative structures and modeling and ownership, and showed what could be done from the perspective of the excluded African American workers and such, because we're still in that situation right now and we're still working for the benefits of those workers. Okay,
and that's a new one for us. What is your favorite resource on employee ownership?
My favorite resource, I would say, so I'm going to plug the USDA Rural Cooperative Development Grant Program, which unfortunately has been losing federal funding, but they have a long history of producing great literature, great how-to guides, etc. on cooperatives. And we have been, I personally have referred to their documents many times in my growth. Their documents, unfortunately, were removed from their website quite recently per some sort of federal order. But we have access to them still, and we can still share them around. So I'm happy about that.
Very cool. We'll get people to reach out to you. No. And then lastly, last question, what would you say to a business owner who is sitting on the fence regarding a transition to employee ownership?
I would ask them to consider what value the business has brought to them and their community and their workers, and if they want to see that value continue into the future. This is the big picture consideration of legacy. It's the big picture consideration of worker futures, of their community loss of a business, potentially if they try to sell on the open market, which we see has a very low success rate, and all of this wrapped in a fair value sale for the owner to the workers as well. So there are lots of positives if we can just sit down and talk about them.
Okay. Very cool. Frank, thank you so much for your time and sharing your thoughts with us today. I mean, where can people follow you if they'd like to reach out?
Yeah, so our website at Dowie is institute.coop, and you can find me at LinkedIn if you search for my name. I'll also plug our becomingemployeeowned.org website, which is a depository of success stories, and where folks can also sign up for a free 30-minute consultation on exploring their interest in conversion to employee ownership.
Very cool. Okay, that'll be a great resource for all our listeners. Frank, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. So thank you.
Andy, it's been great.
Cheers, mate. Bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to continue learning about employee ownership as an alternative exit, head across to abettermonday.me for additional links and resources. You can also make sure to subscribe or follow along in your favorite podcast app, and be sure to leave us a 5-star review.